The debt ceiling is the legal limit on how much the U.S. government can borrow to pay its bills. It has been raised or suspended dozens of times since it was created in 1917, usually without much controversy. However, in recent years, it has become a source of political conflict and brinkmanship, as some lawmakers have tried to use it as leverage to demand spending cuts or policy changes from the other party. The current debt ceiling was reinstated on August 1, 2021, at about $31 trillion. Since then, the Treasury Department has been using extraordinary measures to avoid defaulting on its obligations, such as suspending investments in federal retirement funds or delaying payments to state and local governments. However, these measures are not enough to cover the gap between the government spending and revenue, which has widened due to the pandemic and the economic stimulus packages. According to the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, the extraordinary measures will run out sometime in October 2021, after which the government will have only a few days of cash on hand to pay its bills. If Congress does not raise or suspend the debt ceiling by then, the U.S. will face an unprecedented default, which could have severe consequences for the economy and the financial system. So why have the debt ceiling talks come to a halt? There are several reasons, but they mostly boil down to partisan disagreements, political pressures and ideological differences. One reason is that Republicans and Democrats have different views on how to address the debt problem. Republicans argue that raising the debt ceiling without spending cuts or reforms would be irresponsible and unsustainable, and that Democrats should bear the sole responsibility for increasing the debt limit since they control both chambers of Congress and the White House. They also oppose some of the spending proposals that Democrats have put forward, such as the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill that would expand social programs and combat climate change. Democrats counter that raising the debt ceiling is a routine and necessary step to pay for bills that both parties have already approved, and that failing to do so would be catastrophic and reckless. They also accuse Republicans of hypocrisy and sabotage, since they voted to raise or suspend the debt ceiling several times under former President Trump, when they added nearly $8 trillion to the national debt with tax cuts and pandemic relief. They also argue that their spending plans are fully paid for by raising taxes on corporations and the wealthy. Another reason is that both parties face political pressures from their base and their donors, which make them reluctant to compromise or cooperate with each other. Republicans fear a backlash from their conservative supporters and media outlets if they are seen as helping Democrats raise the debt ceiling or pass their agenda. They also face pressure from influential groups such as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Wall Street executives, who warn of dire consequences if the debt ceiling is not raised, but also oppose tax hikes on businesses. Democrats face pressure from their progressive wing and activists, who demand that they use their slim majority to enact bold and transformative policies that address inequality and climate change. They also face pressure from labor unions and environmental groups, who support their spending plans but oppose any cuts or concessions on social programs or clean energy. A third reason is that both parties have ideological differences that make it hard for them to find common ground or trust each other. Republicans tend to favor smaller government, lower taxes, and less regulation, while Democrats tend to favor bigger government, higher taxes, and more regulation. These differences affect how they approach issues such as health care, education, immigration, infrastructure, and national security. Moreover, both parties have become more polarized and tribal over time, as they have sorted themselves along cultural, racial, and geographic lines. This has eroded their willingness to work together or compromise for the sake of the national interest. It has also increased their mutual distrust and animosity, as they view each other as enemies rather than rivals. These are some of the main reasons why the debt ceiling talks have come to a halt. Unless there is a breakthrough or a change of heart soon, the U.S. could be heading towards a historic crisis that could damage its economy, its reputation, and its democracy. The debt ceiling is the legal limit on how much the U.S. government can borrow to pay its bills. It is currently set at $28.9 trillion and was reached in January. Since then, the Treasury Department has been using extraordinary measures to avoid defaulting on its obligations, but these measures are expected to run out by early June if Congress does not raise or suspend the debt ceiling by then. The U.S. could face a catastrophic default that would harm the economy and damage its global reputation. To prevent this scenario, President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy have been engaged in intense negotiations over the past few weeks, with the help of their respective teams and other congressional leaders. The talks have been complicated by several factors, such as the ongoing budget talks, the political polarization in Congress, and the different demands from both parties. In this section, we will discuss the role of various actors who testified and lobbied behind the scenes, such as the Treasury Secretary, the Federal Reserve Chair, the Congressional Budget Office, and various interest groups. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has been one of the most vocal advocates for raising the debt ceiling as soon as possible. She has repeatedly warned Congress of the dire consequences of a default, such as higher interest rates, lower growth, reduced social spending, and a loss of confidence in the U.S. dollar and creditworthiness. She has also urged Congress to decouple the debt ceiling from any other policy issues, arguing that it is a matter of paying for what Congress has already authorized and not a license to spend more. Yellen has sent several letters to congressional leaders, outlining the timeline and the risks of a default, and has also testified before various committees to make her case. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell has also expressed his support for raising the debt ceiling without delay. He has echoed Yellen's warnings about the economic damage that a default would cause, both domestically and internationally. He has also emphasized that the Fed's tools are limited in dealing with a default scenario, and that it would not be able to offset the shock to the financial system and the real economy. Powell has testified before Congress several times on this issue, and has also communicated with other central bankers and financial regulators around the world to prepare for any contingency. The Congressional Budget Office, CBO, is a nonpartisan agency that provides analysis and estimates of federal spending and revenues. It has played an important role in informing Congress about the fiscal implications of raising or not raising the debt ceiling. It has provided projections of when the Treasury would run out of cash and extraordinary measures under different scenarios, as well as estimates of how much additional borrowing authority would be needed to avoid a default. It has also analyzed how a default would affect various federal programs and beneficiaries, such as Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, veterans benefits, defense contractors, and federal employees. Various interest groups have also been involved in lobbying Congress on the debt ceiling issue. Some of them have advocated for raising the debt ceiling without any conditions or strings attached, such as business groups, financial institutions, credit rating agencies, foreign governments, and humanitarian organizations. They have stressed the importance of preserving the U.S.'s full faith and credit and avoiding any disruption to the economy and markets. Others have pushed for linking the debt ceiling to certain policy goals or reforms, such as conservative groups, anti-tax activists, environmentalists, and social justice advocates. They have argued that raising the debt ceiling should be accompanied by spending cuts, revenue increases, or other changes to address the long-term fiscal challenges facing the country.